All right, well, welcome to another BBC Global Services webinar. We're excited to share with you today some information just from the doctor's perspective. Today, we're going to have ocular facial plastic surgeon with us, Dr. Mettu. We're extremely excited for those of you that decided to attend our webinar today, and hopefully you'll get a lot of your questions answered. You'll get the opportunity to share and ask some questions if you want to at the end of this webinar. You'll be able to listen and learn from Dr. Mettu. We even have a special guest that we'd like to share with you today. And she is coming all the way, a long way from the Philippines to talk to you today. So I appreciate her attendance today, and we'll do introductions in just a second. But we're so excited to start this webinar today and have a cup of coffee with Dr. Mettu, ocular facial plastic surgeon. If you're tuning in on the replay, I just want you to know, I really appreciate you taking the time to stop and watch each one of these webinars, and hopefully you gain information that helps you improve your practice. That's the whole point of doing these webinars. There is some aspect of BBC Global, yes, everybody already understands that. That's why you're attending the webinar. That's why we do the webinars. However, we're also hoping that you gain value, that you learn something along the way that you can apply directly to your practice, whether it's with us or not. We want to make sure that we're delivering on the value. And so that's why we want to take time today to have a cup of coffee. So if you don't have your coffee, it's okay to go ahead and grab your cup right now. And we're going to get started here talking to Dr. Mettu. It looks like we have a number of attendees starting to come in. Hi, Maria. I appreciate you attending the webinar today. It's great to have you, Maria. We've been talking about the fact that we appreciate Dr. Mettu today, talking to you and sharing with you different ways to improve and grow your practice. And we're going to get an opportunity today to learn all about what Dr. Mettu has done, how he utilizes virtual assistants, and a number of other things. So again, if you're watching on replay, we really appreciate you getting the information and attending and being a part of our educational community that we're trying to create and foster. So with that said, I'd like to take an opportunity and introduce first and foremost on this webinar, our president and CEO, Michael Yablonowitz. Michael is a serial entrepreneur. He's the owner of BBC Global Services. And Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody a little bit about what we're going to be learning today.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time. My name is Mike Yablonowitz, like Nate said, and I'm the president and CEO of BBC Global Services. BBC Global Services is a fully service managed BPO and leader in providing HIPAA-compliant virtual assistance for clinicians. And I'm really excited about this webinar. We pride ourselves in providing valuable content in all of our webinars because we know that your time is extremely valuable and frankly have no time for fluff. I must say this discussion will be of extreme value for any clinician considering working with an outsourced team member. Our discussion today, as Nathan said, is a Q&A with a doctor who currently works with one of our BBC virtual assistants. Rose, she's right there, and have been doing so for well over a year. These questions we will ask didn't come from a textbook. They came from our sales staff after actual questions asked by clinicians during the sales process. You will not only hear from the doctor, but you'll also hear from his virtual assistant, Rose. We hope that at the end, you have gained more information about the staff augmentation option than you had when you came in. And always, if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me or contact anybody in our office. Without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dr. Mettu, certified oculofacial plastic surgeon, founder of Raleigh Eye Care and Face, and renowned as Raleigh's premier eyelid specialist. It is also important to note that in addition to being a raving fan, Dr. Mettu provides guidance to our staff, including training and development of our healthcare virtual assistants. This, along with our endless commitment to the ever-evolving HIPAA compliance, is the major reason behind our success in this space. Dr. Mettu, off to you.
Thank you, Mike, for that great introduction. I appreciate it. I will, at this point, introduce Rose, who is a virtual assistant, has been working with me for a year now. And Rose has had extensive customer service experience, which is very apparent as soon as she joined our team. So we're very grateful for that. Rose is very smart, diligent, hardworking, great communicator. She really has all the attributes that you'd really want in a team member. And Rose, you're very much appreciated, and thank you for being here today as well to join me on this webinar.
All right. Well, it's good to have you, Rose. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Oh, hi, Nathan. Hi, Doctor. Hi, Mike. Hi, everyone. I am doing fine. Yeah, it's a privilege for me to join with on this webinar and to share with you all my experience as a virtual assistant with a great doctor, Dr. Mettu.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Mettu, for joining us. I really appreciate you being here as well. I am going to take a second to take a sip of my coffee because it's coffee time with Dr. Mettu. I got a couple of questions for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it.
Sure.
All right. Wonderful. So this first question I have for you, Dr. Mettu, actually came in when we were at the Absorbs conference recently in Quebec, Canada, just a couple days ago, honestly. And one of the oculofacial plastic surgeons asked me to ask you, what prompted you to consider using a medical virtual assistant?
Yeah, so to be able to answer that question, I'll tell you a little bit more about my practice and kind of my story and how I got to this point. So in 2019, I started my own practice, solo practice. And when I started, it was actually just me. I didn't have an employee. I didn't have a virtual assistant. And, over time, I grew, and then I ultimately hired a full-time employee. And from there, we grew further. And at that point, I started to think about hiring another employee. And then also, I started to learn a little bit more about virtual assistants. So I started to kind of think about having a virtual assistant join me as a more cost-effective, reliable option to help me grow my practice.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And as you were growing, Dr. Mettu, I was just kind of curious as to, what was it in that moment that you were kind of seeing things go on in your practice? What was it that kind of led you to make that decision at that point that like, now's the time? Because that's really what they were asking, right? Because this particular oculofacial plastic surgeon I was talking with had a growing practice. They had hired their first employee. So kind of that similar situation as you. And what was it in your psyche that was like, now's the time to do a virtual assistant?
Yeah, so one thing was I realized that there were several things that we could potentially get someone to help with that would allow us to focus more on patient care. That was one thing. But what really kind of accelerated that process was I had a situation where I had an absence of my employee, and I realized I wanted somebody who could help me even when my staff was out. And one thing I really liked about what BBC Global could offer was, of course, the virtual assistant and everything they could do, but also kind of a buffer, someone else, for example, if Rose is going to be gone as well one day, there's someone else that can fill in. So just someone who I knew I would have a partner who I could always rely on to help me take care of patients.
Sure, sure. So then I'm sure, Dr. Mettu, that there were some, I want to ask this question tactfully because I think it's important that we get all of it out there. And really, I guess the best way to ask it is, could you share some of us your initial concerns and hesitations, kind of that gut feelings that you might have been having whenever you were considering a virtual assistant? And, Rose, appreciate it. Close your ears. I don't want you to think there was any concerns about you. You're fantastic.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'd be happy to comment on that. So, I've heard of virtual assistants for some time, and it had kind of been on the back of my mind, over the years. But then, of course, I mentioned the circumstance where it started to make me think a little bit more seriously. But my concern had all along had been the privacy and security aspects. As you know, many virtual assistant companies have virtual assistants working from home. And I just never was quite comfortable with that arrangement from a privacy and security standpoint. So then when I came to learn, about the BBC Global approach with the work being done in a centralized office where there are managers on site, that the internet, the hardware, the software, all of that is arranged by the company, and when the company provides oversight, and just all the things that are done to be a HIPAA compliant partner. That's really when I started to take the idea of getting a virtual assistant much more seriously, because that, what BBC Global does in that regard really addressed that concern for me.
So I work for BBC Global, so I know all about our HIPAA compliance. In fact, we did a whole webinar on our HIPAA compliant aspect. What kind of things did you do to uncover to ensure that we were HIPAA compliant for you? Like, what were you looking at?
Yeah, well, for one, the work being done in an office is, fantastic because it's secure. The hardware is controlled, the software is not an individual acquiring those things, per some checklist. So that was great. All of the firewall, et cetera. I did watch the HIPAA webinar. I think they did a great job of really covering all of that. But even all the way to, from the fact that anyone who works there, their phones, for example, are put away. From top to bottom, just everything's done the right way. And so that, when I learned about all of those things, I could tell that the approach, that the company was taking was really in line with the kind of security and privacy that I would want. So that's really what resonated well with me.
Awesome. So, all right. So you had some initial concerns about HIPAA. Then you kind of checked into what our process was and kind of verified what we did that kind of made us HIPAA compliant. And that was important. There was some concerns initially. It sounds like just about whether VA was going to be able to do the job or not. And then you go through the process and you start talking with BBC Global Services, trying to make your decision. What ultimately led you to make the decision to have a VA?
Well, I think the privacy security thing was probably definitely the biggest thing. And once I felt like that was addressed, I think the major barrier was kind of lifted there in terms of me moving forward. But just kind of taking a step back and look at it more broadly, something that just kind of tipped in favor. Of course, it's a very cost-effective solution, but it's also one that something that we may not readily think about is we're getting really great quality service. Rose is fantastic. She does so much. And at the same time, there's not any hard resources that I have to worry about supplying, even from something as the space itself here in my office to computer, phone, et cetera. It really was a big benefit that all of that is taken care of and provided for by BBC Global. But again, from my perspective, the fact that Rose is in an office doing the work was very valuable for me.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, and that's really what we strive to be and do. And so we're going to make sure that the team member has an office, that they follow HIPAA compliant rules, that those things are just part of our internal deal. But it's also got to be a smooth process for picking your VA or finding your VA or recruiting or searching for your VA. And so we want to make sure that we make that experience kind of smooth and easy for people. But what was your experience like with finding Rose? Because I mean, she's a diamond in the rough. She's fantastic. What was your experience with, how did that come about?
So initially, early on, I expressed kind of my preferences and what my needs were. And then from there, I got some information, like a resume, essay with typing assessment, some like recorded interviews to review, kind of basically like a packet of information for various candidates. And then from there, I was able to review the information and then ultimately decide who I wanted to interview in real time. And, then of course, went through that process. I interviewed Rose, and then, the rest was history. So here we are now.
Yeah. So it sounds like, just a very standard, our process is very standard to what you would deal with an internal recruiter in the US. We just happen to do that same process internationally, and we go through a whole vetting process ahead of time for you just to make sure that the people that we're passing along are qualified quality candidates. And then ultimately you're selecting the right person for your practice. Was there anything that you were specifically looking for in a candidate that kind of was like, that could give the people that are watching the webinar now, like Maria, or those on the replay, any information you could give them that would help them in choosing their VA?
Yeah, I think everyone's going to have different preferences, different requirements or certain things they're looking for. Some might be looking for certain experience within the healthcare industry, like insurance or whatever the case may be. For me, that wasn't important. It was really customer service, having somebody who had great customer service skills. And I could tell that, and communication skills, and I could tell that immediately, when connecting with Rose. So I think just communicating, thinking thoughtfully about what any preferences are and communicating that to, whoever is helping with that process is important in helping kind of get matched up with the right person.
Yeah, and Rose, I want to just ask you a quick question because you've been on and been so patient and waiting for an opportunity to speak. And so I just want to make sure I bring you into the conversation to ask you, how was your onboarding experience coming to work for BBC Global Services?
Um, at first, by the way, this is my first time working as a healthcare virtual assistant. During onboarding, I was so happy. I was so excited because knowing that, oh, I am going to use my skills in communicating other people, most especially on the other side of the world. Yeah, and since day one up until today, to be honest with you, I am very excited. Like, just every day, I just make it normal, and I just take it seriously. Most especially doing my task every day, and I am also very happy because Dr. Met is very open, and he always accepts suggestions because he always asks me what can you say about this, and then we are going to put this into action. Yeah, and so we have the great teamwork. I just wanted to let you know, guys.
Oh, I love that. I love that answer. So then, Dr. Mettu, once you decided on Rose, there's an onboarding process to get the VA started to make sure that they work well within your practice. How was the onboarding process for getting her started?
Yeah, so after the BBC Global team did the initial kind of training, we set up our systems in place to get Rose on board. So that includes the EMR, VoIP software like the web-based access, and an extension on the phone tree, Google Suite. Those are the three big things that we use to collaborate with each other. So once we got those in place, then we, in the Google workspace, we have a shared drive where we have a lot of our office protocols, policies, et cetera, like basically step-by-step guides on how to do the various things that need to be done. And actually when Rose joined, they were not nearly as good as they are now, because just like she was saying, she has added and enhanced our processes. So with suggestions, feedback, we make adjustments to how we do things. So, but we did use those initially in training, as a resource. And then we would use Google Meet, have signed a BAA with Google. So we do Google Meet with screen shares to initially kind of demonstrate that. And Shayla, who works with me, did a great job basically getting Rose up to speed on the various things that we wanted her help with. And it's been, a dynamic process, and as mentioned, in terms of kind of updating some processes, protocols, screenshots, and Rose has been great about, when she would do something, saw a place to make it better, to figure out how to do that, and then communicating that with us. And then just progressively, Rose learned all the various tasks in that same manner. And, as needed, we'll still collaborate with, we'll hop on a quick Google Meet if needed. Doesn't come up as often. We have GChat, et cetera. So, but the initial process, that's kind of how it unfolded.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're talking a lot about the different, so she has you have a process document for all of your different tasks that are shared with Rose. What are some of those tasks that you have Rose doing for your practice? I mean, and this isn't just my question, okay? Again, when I was at the conference with the occupational plastic surgeons, and we were talking about VAs, they said, will you please ask Dr. Mettu, not like, hey, she does insurance verifications for me. Okay, that's one thing, and we can understand what that is. What are some other things that Rose does for you as far as tasks go?
Yeah, she does a lot. And really everything that can be done remotely, she does. And Rose, I'm probably going to miss some things here as I try to list them off so that you can chime in if, with whatever I miss. But from scheduling appointments, incoming referrals, outgoing referrals, scheduling surgery, CT scans, MRIs, getting authorization for all those things, confirmations, contacting with the patient themselves or just letting referring doctor's office know patients are scheduled. She pre-charts, follows up on denied insurance claims. You mentioned insurance, like verification of benefits, eligibility. She does that. Not only that, actually, though, she'll also calculate how much a patient will owe, based upon these deductible plans, co-insurance plans, or even copay plans. So identify with insurance how much a patient will owe and communicate that to the patient in advance. That's one of our processes to inform patients ahead of time, not at the appointment itself. And so she does all of that in advance of the appointment, make sure all the appointment notes are updated with why a patient's coming, what Shayla needs to collect here in the office, just everything you could do remotely. Rose is doing it.
And Rose, just for you, is there anything that Dr. Mettu, he covered a lot of stuff. That was an impressive list, by the way. I was trying to sit here thinking with my job, like Mike has me doing stuff for him. I'm wondering if I do that much for Mike. but is there any other tasks that you do that Dr. Mettu didn't mention?
Let me see. Yeah, I also reaching out patients because recently when Dr. Mettu asked me if what would be the best way to provide good customers for patients, because we are just three, Shayla, Dr. Mettu, and I. So most of the time we just send text messages to the patient, and then I just realized that why not I am going to call directly to the patient so that it will be more easier for them to set up an appointment or to ask what are their concerns. So yeah, that's one of the tasks that I'm doing every day. So I am calling patients just to ask if they would like to set up an appointment, and then I'm going to reach out to referring doctors also, because sometimes Dr. Mettu will ask me to refer some patients to another provider. And what else? I am also following up claims to insurance companies, and yeah, something like that.
Awesome. Wonderful. So then you obviously have to have access and utilize his EMR system. So, I've had lots of questions about how does that work? How do you interact? How do you learn the EMR system? So how were you able to learn the EMR system and the other office systems? Like, how did that come about?
Yes. By the way, prior to my training, after my final interview with Dr. Mettu, I did my self-research because it's quite challenging, and I am not familiar with EMR. But then I was able to learn and understand it during my training with Dr. Mettu and Shayla, and they taught me a lot how things work in keeping the patient's records, how to be more careful in providing information due to confidentiality. And to be honest, it was very hard for me at first because I don't have any experiences in this field, healthcare, knowing this is medical, and I graduated in marketing management. I am more on business, so this is new to me. So I always keep in mind that everything can be learned. So slowly by slowly, I started to understand how it works. And of course, because of Dr. Mettu and Shayla's patience with me, it helped me discover the things I'm capable of. And after days and weeks of training, I was able to do my tasks, my daily tasks. And now it's easy for me to handle things. But of course, I always consult Dr. Mettu if ever there are information that I am not familiar with, to avoid providing wrong information to the patient. And also, I always accept feedback from Dr. Mettu.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for that answer, because that leads right into the next question that I got. One of the things, Dr. Mettu, that they asked over and over again, person after person, was how do you communicate effectively with your VA? Like, what do you do?
Before I answer that, I'll just chime in. It was interesting to hear your perspective, Rose, because from my standpoint, you learned, very quickly and did a great job.
Thank you.
So yeah, it was a great, you did awesome, and you're continuing to do a great job. So the question is, how do we communicate? Is that?
Yeah. Since she's in the Philippines, how do you guys communicate on a daily basis?
So we have a few ways we communicate. The first is I mentioned the kind of Google workspace that we have. And so we have our three, there's three of us that are part of the team. So we have a chat that's active that we will use usually for not patient-specific stuff, just more general conversation. You know, like for example, I was running late to the surgery center today, and I was coming from somewhere else. Just put a quick message in the chat and asked, you know, one of them to call. So things like that, we'll just communicate, just to let the surgery center know, like I'm running late, for example. Other ways we'll communicate are the Google, like a Google Meet. We'll do, you know, a screen share. Like for example, there was some glitch in the software, I think, for the posting a surgery. Like and so that's a situation where we just hopped on a quick screen share to sort of figure out what was going on there. So an example, you will utilize that as needed for that kind of situation. We will communicate through our VoIP, the software, the web-based application has internal notes where in a patient text conversation that we're having, or even phone log, we can communicate with each other. So we'll do some patient-specific communication there. And then with our medical record, really, there are tasks that are assigned, you know, to each of us, and we'll send tasks back and forth that are, you know, associated with the patient with an update or question or something along those lines. So we'll communicate about specific tasks in that way. So those are the three ways that we're communicating primarily.
All right. So I got the first two was Google, like a Google Hangouts or Google Messenger.
Mhm.
Then the second one was Google Meets, being able to share your screen and do stuff. What was the third way that you said for everybody?
Our VoIP web-based software like Access, where basically it's like an inbox where we have a patient, and Rose will basically make sure all the patient's name and everything is saved there, but it's like an inbox. And so we can see a patient communication, incoming, outgoing, et cetera. And under that patient's a communication thread, if there's a question, let's say, or a great example is a post-op patient texts a photo for me to look at. Rose will alert me to that photo by, she can page me on that message, alert me that there's a question or something to review. So that's a great way that we communicate in a patient-specific manner on that aspect of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. That makes total sense. So then you guys are communicating well. There's also a stigma out there, and I don't know how to shatter the stigma without asking the question directly. And I hope this isn't offensive to Rose because she's got beautiful English, but I want to ask the question directly in the kindest way I can. How have your patients reacted to interacting with Rose? That's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring Rose on camera, and so everybody could see and interact with Rose and understand how she communicates just in a meeting like this. But how have your patients received the utilization of clearly somebody that's not American English speaking, I guess is the best way to ask it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead, Rose. You go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, doctor.
Yeah.
I believe that question is for me, right?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yeah. To be honest with you, it was quite challenging for me because, as I mentioned, I am living on the other side of the world. Yeah, every time patients would ask me, "Where are you located at?" At first, I was hesitant to, should I say in the Philippines or should I say, and I just say, "Oh, I'm just living on the other side of the world." Um, if you're familiar with Philippines, yeah, that's where you can find me. So so far for a year of being a virtual assistant, I never heard complaining. I never heard our patients complaining on how I communicate with them, most especially in setting up their appointments, providing the cost, and even telling them additional information that they need to know. I can say I am more confident on interacting with them because prior to this job, I've been working as a customer service for years, which really prepared me for this. And I always make sure I have a good communication with them. And now, Dr. Mettu created a new website, which I was so happy because he added my photo and my information there. So if you're going to visit the website, the patients will know that, oh, she's coming from the Philippines. So yeah. And there was one of our patients, like I said, hello, thank you for calling Raleigh Eye. And then, oh, you're Rose. You're from the Philippines. You graduated at university of Mindanao. I just said, oh yeah, that's me. How are you? Yeah,
Oh,
and yeah, adding the information on the website, it's really great. And I am so thankful to Dr. Mettu about that.
Dr. Mettu, what's been your experience from the patient's perspective? What feedback have you gotten about the fact that you're utilizing a medical virtual assistant in order to help you grow and run your practice?
Yeah, we've had just nothing but positive feedback. Rose, as you can tell, has great customer service communication skills. So I've had a lot of positive feedback as well, specifically with regard to her communication and how prompt and timely she is at addressing patient concerns. Um, and it's interesting though, because I think there are a large number of patients where it's not readily apparent that she is not in our office, because we do have plenty of patients who come here expecting to meet Rose, and I think they're probably disappointed that they're not meeting her. Um, and so, so that's another perspective to offer. And then, when they're asked her, because it's just me and Shayla here in the office, and I'll just say, she works remotely, but no one's really ever asked beyond that. But of course, Rose is a valued member of the team. As she mentioned, she's featured on our website. We're so happy to have her as, part of our small team, but we're family basically. So
You
Yeah,
know,
thank you.
for sure. And Dr. Mettu, that is so smart to include her picture and her credentials and her information on your website. I think that helps to establish and just kind of build that relationship right from the very beginning. And I can tell you're pretty relationally oriented anyways, and you have a good relationship with everybody on your staff, Rose and Shayla,
Shayla. Mhm.
Shayla, which is, the signs of a great leader. So I'm sure that making these decisions has had an impact then on your business. You have leadership, you have these staff members that you've hired. What has been the impact of utilizing a medical VA in your day-to-day activities and overall patient care? Okay. Do you have any like metrics or statistics or information or facts that you can share with everybody on what that did for your practice?
Yeah. So from a business standpoint, I'm not one who like really makes projections or follows metrics. So I don't have, that information, but I can tell you that overall, our patient care is far better because we can really focus on, patients who are here in the office, because I'm confident that Rose can address everything else that's going on that needs to happen with the practice. So we can deliver better patient care on our end. And then overall, we have a much better customer service experience because of what we're able to do in the office. But on top of that, what Rose is able to do with everything else that needs to happen to make the practice run smoothly. So it's made for, I think, a better patient experience, better patient care, smoother, day to day for me, and I think for all of us. So it's been really great.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So I don't want you to pretend that BBC Global Services on this line. I know we're sitting here, Dr. Mettu, and I know that you're having the conversation with the CEO, myself, of our organization. Thanks for being here, Mike. I appreciate you being on this call. And I kind of have just, wanted to understand and better know. Pretend we're not here. What advice would you give somebody that's considering hiring a medical VA? The true, real advice. Like, what would you say?
I would say make a list of what your needs are, make a list of what your concerns are, and kind of put that down, type it up, and just kind of put that go through that mental exercise of generating those lists. And then as you're looking at options, see who's not only going to be able to address your needs but also your concerns. And then I think from there, one can get a better sense of who might be a best fit in terms of who to partner with.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Rose, anything else that you'd like to share from working with Dr. Mettu and working, for BBC Global Services? Anything else you'd like to share?
Yes, definitely. I have. Because working with BBC and Dr. Mettu is a great privilege for me. So I would like to say, if you will join BBC, you'll have a great experience. If you would like to know how to interact with patients, how to process something that you never expect that you will have soon. So I can say that submission, obedience, and acceptance. If you be given a feedback from your client, is the key for you to enjoy your job. And then just enjoy yourself. That's it, because that's what I'm doing every day. I just enjoy myself. I just I just allow myself to explore. And if you are going to ask Dr. Meto, I keep on asking to him some questions like, Doctor, I'm not familiar with this. I was just like a kid, like I don't know anything. So every time that he will give a feedback, I have here my notes, like, okay, for today, this is a feedback from Dr. Metu, and then for the next day, this is my feedback. Because I always make sure that on the next day, I am going to do those things that I wasn't able to do yesterday. So for today, my goal is to do it right, and that's my advice.
Wonderful, wonderful. I do want to take a second and see if there's any questions in the chat that pop up. If you do have any questions and you're on the webinar here, I know a couple of you have popped on, but I know you're also busy and probably trying to catch us in between patients or surgeries or whatever you have going on. If you have any questions and you want to throw those in the chat for Dr. Mettu and for Rose, we can do that right now, and that way we can make sure you get your questions answered as well. Let me see here if there's any. Let me pop up the chat so I can double check, see if anybody has any questions. I do have one question here. I'm not going to name names for you guys just because I don't want to call anybody out on who's asking the question. Is come across private, but this question is for Dr. Mettu. Dr. Mettu, it says here that so you have Rose doing all of these different tasks for you. And the question is phrased in such a way, I'm not going to read it word for word, but the question is phrased in such a way that do you ever feel that you've put too much on Rose?
I have not thought about it that way. I know there's a lot of various things that she does. She does it all very well and is very efficient and is very capable. So I don't have any hesitations in that regard. And the way we operate our practice and run things, I can see how things are unfolding. I can see what she's doing. We have great, open communication. And I don't feel that way. I've not gotten that sense either. So I think that she is doing a phenomenal job with all of the different tasks, that are sent her way.
Yeah, Rose, how about you? How do you feel about the workload that you have right now? Do you feel it's manageable? Do you feel like you're able to get everything done usually in a day?
Yes, it is manageable, by the way, because it's just a matter of time management. Because I am working for 8 hours, so I know I will be able to finish all the tasks given to me. And then and every time that Dr. Meto will give me a task, I make sure that I'll do it immediately. So, and as what I mentioned, if I have questions, if I am not familiar with those things, so I'm going to ask Dr. Meto or Shayla so that they could help me and make it on time.
All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. I see another question coming in here, and I just want to get this one answered too. Yeah. So Rose is in the Philippines, which is opposite hours of the United States. So does Rose, do you work, Rose, during normal US business hours? How does that work?
On my previous job, as a customer service, I used to work on during this time, like the opposite time that you have there. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I just manage my time. At first, it was very hard to make an adjustment, because here in the Philippines, it's just very challenging to live, because I know Mike was here. So and yeah, I just make it just I always imagine myself like, okay, I'm in the US right now, so I have to change my mindset, change everything, like I'm in the US and tomorrow I'm in the Philippines
I love
after
it.
the shift.
I love it. I love it. All right. We got time for one last question here, Dr. Mettu, and this question's for you. What is your favorite part about utilizing medical virtual assistants? So I guess the way that they're phrasing this question is what is the biggest benefit that you see? If you had to sum it all, this entire conversation, this entire coffee talk, up in one conversation. How would you summarize the benefit of working with BBC Global?
Well, I think we're getting essentially Rose is fantastic, and through the partnership with BBC Global, we're able to get really high quality work that quite frankly, it's hard to find work of that quality here. So we found really high quality work that's hard to come by. It's cost effective. We are also BBC Global is providing the physical space, the hardware, software, so some of those logistics and just space considerations are addressed for us because of course space is at a premium as well. So we're getting all of these amazing benefits, and it's kind of cool actually to be connected to someone on the other side of the world and kind of have a connection that way. So it's been great, but that's how I would summarize it. It's high quality work, cost effective. Logistics it's like having essentially, it's very similar to having a full-time employee, but BBC Global is taking care of the payroll, benefits, all of those other aspects in logistics, supplies, hardware, software, et cetera. So it's amazing. It's an ideal situation.
Well, if we were sitting on stage at a conference, Dr. Mettu, everybody in the audience would be giving you a round of applause right now. Rose, you'd be getting a standing ovation.
Oh,
Mike,
Yes.
I'm sure you'd like to say a few words for Dr. Mettu, because he's been a fantastic client of ours.
A fantastic client, ambassador, helper to make us as good as we are today. Like I said before, the reason why we do this well is because of Dr. Mettu's help, along with our endless pursuit to HIPAA compliance, to make sure that not only are we providing the right people, but we're securing your business. That's a huge part of all this. And one of the things I just want to bring up that was mentioned a bunch of times in this webinar and this conversation, this coffee talk, is organization, efficiencies. And that's really what this is all about, right? It's really providing the help to the physicians, the clinicians, and to give them help is to provide organization and efficiencies and time so they can work on patient care and maybe spend a little time with their family every once in a while, right? And I think that those two things allow us to really be a true value to Dr. Mettu and the other, clinicians that we're pleased to service every day. And on that note, I again want to thank Dr. Mettu for his time, and also for Rose. I mean, we sprung this on her yesterday, and she was more than happy to come and share her thoughts. So both of you, thank you so much. Nathan, as always, thank you for doing everything you do here, as well as what you do for my firm. Without you, we would not have the evangelist that we have. So, and again, as you can see, if you have any questions about virtual assistants, want to speak to me directly, you can always call us. I'm here to talk, and thanks again.
All right, guys, visit bbcglobalservices.com. That's bbcglobalservices.com, or you can give us a call at 888-944-6618. That's 888-944-6618, and talk to somebody about a medical virtual assistant. And you too can have a Rose on your team. You guys have a good afternoon. I really appreciate you spending your time. Thank you very much. Good, you guys. Talk to you later. Adios.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
thank you.